All right, welcome back to the KFYR Plus News Desk. And today we're joined by Lenny Powell, staff attorney at the Native American Rights Fund, to discuss a pivotal Supreme Court case that could reshape the Voting Rights Act and its impact on Native American representation and civil rights. Mr. Powell, thank you for your time today. Sure appreciate that.
Hey, you're having me.
You got it. So can you explain what's at stake in the Supreme Court case challenging Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and then we'll get to how it relates to our North Dakota redistricting case?
Certainly. So, at the Native American Rights Fund, we have a case about whether Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is privately enforceable, i.e., whether the voters who are actually not able to vote are able to sue to enforce their rights, or whether it's only the United States government that can sue to enforce that statute.
Okay, and so how does this case differ from or even relate to the North Dakota redistricting case involving Native American voters?
So, I may not have understood your question. There's also a case before the Supreme Court right now about whether the redistricting in Alabama is constitutional. The remedy that was imposed there. To back up a little bit, there's two questions at issue. One is what is the remedy that can be used when there's a violation of the Voting Rights Act, and then who can sue to enforce the Voting Rights Act in the first instance. The case in which the Supreme Court heard arguments recently was about that remedy question. There's also a case that we've brought, this North Dakota one, where the issue is the remedy. That's also at the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has not yet decided whether it will hear arguments in the case.
Okay, they haven't decided yet. So why is Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act especially important for Native American communities then?
So we rely on the Voting Rights Act very often in Native American communities. Unfortunately, discrimination in voting remains a persistent problem, and the Voting Rights Act is an essential tool to combating districts that unfairly and illegally deprive Native Americans of the opportunity to vote candidates, to elect candidates of their choice.
Okay, let's barrel down on locally. How does the current district map affect the ability of Native voters in North Dakota to elect their candidates of their choice?
Yeah, so for decades, Native Americans in what was Legislative District 9 had been able to vote for three representatives to the North Dakota legislature, but after the 2020 redistricting, that number went down to one because of the way that the North Dakota legislature reshaped the district.
Okay. What are the consequences of packing and cracking Native voters into districts as seen in the 21 North Dakota map?
So the primary one was this reduction from 3 to 1, a significant change that um, was unnecessary based on the changes to the population.
Okay. So there wasn't many meetings, I guess, right? So what does the lack of public meetings near reservations during redistricting say about the state's approach to Native civic participation?
Yeah, in general, often Native American calls to ensure that their representation is respected go unheard. In this instance, for instance, the chairs of the Turtle Mountain and Spirit Lake reservations, the two tribes that are impacted by this redistricting, specifically called for the creation of a district that would ensure their right to represent candidates of their choice was still respected. But the North Dakota legislature didn't listen to that request and impose the map that the chair said would result in the decrease from 3 to 1, the result that we did in fact end up seeing as a result of the map.
And so what are the legal arguments that the Native American Rights Fund is making to defend Native voting rights in these cases?
So our argument is pretty simple. The question is whether the Voting Rights Act creates rights that are privately enforceable. The Supreme Court has said the key question really is whether it's a statute that creates individual rights. And I think you can tell even from the name of the statute that we're talking about, the Voting Rights Act, that's exactly what this law does.
If the Supreme Court ultimately sides with the Eighth Circuit, what precedent does it set for tribal nations and individual voters nationwide?
So, if the Supreme Court were to take the case and side with the Eighth Circuit, it would be devastating for voting rights The statistics bear out that around 90% of all voting rights actions are brought by private parties, and those statistics are similar in the tribal context as well. Most of the major Supreme Court cases about the Voting Rights Act in general have been brought by private parties, and sometimes the administration brings essentially no lawsuits. Right now, the voting rights section of the Department of Justice has been quite substantially reduced in its staffing. So the result of saying private parties can't sue to enforce their own right to vote is to effectively gut that right altogether.
What message would you share with the Native voters who feel discouraged by some of these legal setbacks?
So the message I would say is don't lose hope, and we are optimistic about what's going to happen in our case. The Supreme Court actually has preliminarily weighed in on this issue. So we did lose in the Eighth Circuit, but we asked for an emergency stay of the Eighth Circuit's decision from the U.S. Supreme Court this summer, and the Supreme Court granted that stay. And that is an indication that the Supreme Court is likely to take our case and ultimately rule in our favor.
As we look ahead, what gives you hope in the fight to protect Native voting rights, and what message would you share with tribal communities facing some of these legal challenges?
And what gives me hope is the engagement on this issue and the persistence that Native Americans continue to have to ensure that their rights are heard. I mean, there's a long history of discrimination against Native voters. Until the 20th century, essentially, Native Americans were prohibited from voting at all. That was certainly the case in North Dakota until 1922. But the overall trend is positive. The trend, even in the short term, is positive, as I mentioned, in terms of this specific Supreme Court case. And the way we continue to make progress is by continuing to push forward and insist that our rights be respected.
Lenny Powell, staff attorney at the Native American Rights Fund, thank you for your time today and your insights. Sure do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, 1:40 here at the news desk. We'll take a quick break. We're back with more news next on KFYR+.